3 decades ago, Mighty Morphin Power Rangers captured my imagination. Like many of my fellow 90s kids, I watched after school, joined the official fan club, and of course, collected the toys. Eventually, I put those toys away, but the flame of my Power Rangers fandom never died. Now, in this milestone 30th anniversary year, I am re-examining the show, its legacy, and the tale of its most legendary ranger across media. It's time to get back to action. Welcome back to Summoning the ZORDS, a Power Rangers fan journey. I'm your host, Anthony Desiato. Joining me to discuss the television arcs White Light and Return of the Green Ranger is one of the assistant managers of Rainbow Comics, Cards, and Collectibles in South Dakota, Jon Runyan. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me this evening.
My pleasure. So I said welcome back. This is our first episode of 2023 for Summoning the ZORDS. It's also our first episode back after the hiatus we took following the passing of Jason David Frank. So this podcast had just started in late 2022. We dropped 2 episodes on the Green Ranger television arc. I was prepared to drop 2 more episodes on the first 2 years of the Boom Studios comics. Those are in the can. Those are still coming. We're going to get to them pretty soon, actually. And then, of course, we were all met with the very sad news of Jason David Frank's passing, and I put out just a little 15-minute mini episode talking about that. And it just, my gut was to just kind of hit pause for the remainder of 2022, which we did. And over that time, I've honestly been immersing myself in rewatching Jason David Frank's episodes, and specifically within the Mighty Morphin era. And that's why coming back now, I wanted to start with White Light in particular, as well as Return of the Green Ranger, but White Light in particular, because I think after everything we talked about with the ups and downs of Tommy as the Green Ranger and getting his powers and losing his powers and coming back and losing them again, it just felt like this was a great moment of redemption and resolution to have him back as the White Ranger. So again, we're going to get to those episodes on the comics, but I wanted to spend just a little bit more time here in this in this comfort zone of the White Light episodes, and I'm really excited to have you here. And the last thing I'll say by way of housekeeping, hopefully this is a welcome change for the audience. Originally, this podcast was monthly, but I've decided that we are going to shift to bi-weekly. So we're going to have episodes every other week instead of every month. I've been recording ahead, and we're now in the 30th anniversary year of the Power Rangers franchise. And so I just want to tear it up this year. So 2 episodes a month. And we're just going to have a great year reliving the Power Rangers franchise, specifically the arc of Tommy Oliver, because we can trace it across so much of the franchise's history, as well as dipping into the comics here and there, because that's been such a wonderful addition to the franchise, to the mythology. All right, enough from me for a second here. I want to toss it over to you. The subtitle of the show is A Power Rangers Fan Journey, right? So I would love to hear a bit about your personal history. How did you find it? How old were you? How long did you watch? What did it mean to you? Whatever you want to share about this, I would love to hear.
So there's a lot that goes onto it. My story definitely mirrors maybe a lot of folks my age. So growing up, Power Rangers was definitely my go-to after school. Just something that I would run home and, get ready to watch. And man, oh man, when you let me know what episodes you wanted to review specifically, I was like, oh man, there's so much hype around Tommy as a character and just his moments. And I remember, and we'll go into, more of the episode specifics, but I just remember overall just feeling enchanted by the premise of everything that is Power Rangers, and feeling like when you're on the playground or you're playing with your neighbors, that could be me too, And so definitely, first of all, the toys were so fun to me. Having that original Megazord set and playing with it. So I grew up in Nebraska, and we had just gotten orders to move to Japan in 95. And so my dad went ahead of our family, and I remember taking the whole Megazord with me through the airport, because you used to be able to go to the gates and see people off. And I was playing with the Megazord, he was, we were waiting for him to board and fly off into a whole different country, and we would, wrap up things here and then join him in Japan. And so I remember that Megazord coming with me, and it was just kind of my comfort piece, down to the Mastodon shield and the power sword. I brought those with me too. Um, I will say that other collectibles included the trading cards were just something that I enjoyed getting my hands on. But most importantly, was just really soaking up the story and just being so enamored with everything that was going on the TV. That first season, especially, is what really drew me in. The movie, when that dropped, oh man, and the soundtrack, which is still under my bed in a Rubbermaid. God bless CDs. I miss them. I really should get that out sometime. But I used to blare that Power Ranger song and jump off the couch. I remember the Van Halen track on there. Man, it was just such an upbeat track, and the energy surrounding it, and it was just so magical. And the funny thing about that magic is that it's still there to this day. You can put that movie back in and just feel good. Like maybe some of the special effects didn't age well, as we're spoiled with new cinematics and stuff, and that's all fine. But the overall premise and everything about it, to me, it just makes me happy still. So when I watched these episodes, I was just pulled right back in, and I'm like, I just can't stop watching it. And for our episodes, I crushed it all in one sitting. I was like, let's go, So it was so exciting to me. The craziest part about my Power Rangers journey was literally moving to Japan and seeing Power Ranger merch in another country. That was really gnarly. And so I got to see things that maybe we didn't learn about on America TV for a while, in advance, which was kind of gnarly. And seeing alternate teams and trying to piece it together, like what the heck's going on? 95 to 2000, the internet was just starting to, become more and more accessible. But didn't have the resources that we do now. I couldn't just hop on Google on my smartphone and see, who is this team or anything like that. So it truly was Power Rangers hit my life during an international journey of mine, as well as just figuring a lot of things out. And it's just it always has held a endearing place in my heart. When I learned about the comic books coming out again, so the Boom Studio runs, I just was like, no way. I'm totally getting all of this, and I've loved it ever since. I've been collecting, since the relaunch through Boom Studios, and they've just done a really nice job with it. And so if you guys aren't reading it, I highly recommend it. It's just continued stories. Shout out to Power Rangers Pink, the limited run. I love that. And I just love seeing what they're doing with all the characters. So, yeah.
Oh, man, I loved hearing all of that, especially about the trading cards, because I was just thinking about those today. Those were... anyone you talk to who is a fan of Power Rangers, of course, we talk about the toys, but the trading cards, those hold a special place for me. I mean, I remember getting those packs. I remember tearing them open. I remember the red binder that I had all of the cards in. I remember throwing them away when my parents sold my childhood home, and now regretting that and wishing that I had how much space would that have taken up. But they were wonderful. So I'm right there with you with the car. It's fascinating to hear about your move to Japan. And I'm curious, well, I guess you answered the question. So then you got to see the Super Sentai series. That must have been, because honestly, it's only really now that I've been doing this podcast where I've been looking up on YouTube, like looking up clips from the original show. And thankfully, there are a lot of awesome YouTubers out there who have done side-by-side comparisons of the American and Japanese footage. And I can imagine, especially as a kid, like what a warp that must have been to see that. Oh, that's nuts. Did you enjoy them? And have you gone back to them since you've been older and stateside?
So with a series that, and we did have literal television channels come through our TVs and stuff. And so it wasn't MTV, it was Channel V over there. And so there's all these alternatives that would come in, and you just kind of learn to navigate, and I'll check next week around this time and see if that's back on again. Things like Dragon Ball Z and everything. So with Power Rangers, yeah, it was crazy. I just watched. I couldn't understand the dialect, of course. But I was so enamored with, like, this is awesome. It makes me feel like I'm at home, and, you just kind of go with the flow. And I never did get to see, like, a steady run of it or anything like that, because it was always so irregular, or my schedule, as a youngin, was kind of at the mercy of extracurriculars or whatever, but you caught it when you could. And then when you were out and about, I would see toys and stuff at various malls and shops throughout the country. And that was really fun too. I'd just be like, this is kind of cool. So
So, but now thinking about this, so you missed out then on the American series for that time, right? Or did you have some way of watching them?
For the American series, so when I was still in Nebraska, I did get to see all the way through um, the. I think that it would have been around the time of the White Ranger premiere. I know I remember that for sure because my friend had the Tiger Zord toy. But then the movie, I believe, was something that I got to enjoy over in Japan at the on base theater. And then the soundtrack I remember playing like in our family living room in our small military house, and my parents were like, "Not this song again," you know. And but it was kind of a smooth. The movie really helped connect a lot of the dots for me, and the American TV that we did get had some delays on there, but they were really good at having a lot of kid-friendly programming, and so still got that X-Men '90s cartoon from Fox Kids, Power Rangers, and all that stuff. It would just be at specific times.
Gotcha.
So yeah.
Obviously, we'll be doing an episode on the movie not too long from now. And I think for all of us Power Rangers fans, that was so pivotal. And it's funny because even people I talk to, we've talked about this on the show, the difference that a few years can make. So even people I've talked to who maybe were like 2 or 3 years older than me and kind of like this wasn't really for them, even they know the movie. Like there are a few people I've talked to and they're like, yeah, the show, but like the movie, like that was such a moment. And certainly for those of us who do know and love this, and again, we'll get into this more when we do that episode, but it's just like it occupies such a unique spot where it utilizes the cast, right, of the show, but we have original costumes and a storyline that would then be done slightly differently on the show. So it's this weird thing where if they had just brought in new actors and done a totally separate thing, that would have made sense. Or if they had used the aesthetic and props and costumes and continuity of the show, that also would have made sense. But it ended up being this amalgam of those things, and it's just its own thing, and it's amazing. And I've revisited that actually not too long ago, but I'm very excited to get into that again. I have the Blu-ray, so I'm going to dive into that and the special features. And I actually, on that note, I spent more time than I should have last night on the special features that are on the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers Complete Series DVD set from Shout Factory.
Oh, sure.
It's a great set, and I didn't even realize there was stuff. I don't want to take us on too long of a tangent, but I only recently learned that there was a proposed spinoff for Bulk and Skull, and they came out with this VHS, The Good, the Bad, and the Stupid, where Bulk and Skull are trapped in a cave during a Ranger battle, and it caves in, and they're stuck there. And so it's essentially a clip show where as they're stuck in this cave, they're like, hey, remember that time? And then we have our flashbacks. But I recently learned that was a thing and that VHS was out there. And it's like, first of all, it's very expensive. I looked on eBay. I don't have a VCR. And I was like, oh, I would really like to see this. It's on the DVD set. The DVD set also has the live stage show, which I saw at Radio City Music Hall as a kid, and it's on there. So it's a great set. But they also have these behind the scenes interviews, and they talk about the casting and the production of the show. And this is a long-winded way of getting to this point, which is the writers and directors talked about how essentially what they would do, especially in the beginning, was they would take like 15 episodes of Super Sentai and they would edit, they would pull out everything that they could use, right? All of the battle scenes and Zord fights and everything, and like put them into different buckets, different categories. And then the writers would, craft stories around them. And it gave me more of an appreciation. I think it's easy to kind of look at this show, this kid show, and especially now with adult eyes looking at sort of the shift from the American to Japanese footage. There's so much that you see now. You can kind of see the seams. But I just hearing them talk about it, it's like, no small feat to stitch this thing together. And it gave me a lot of appreciation. But the thing that made me laugh was, I think it was Tony Oliver, one of the head guys involved with the show, talking about how when he got to, I guess, the second batch of Super Sentai episodes, and at that point, they didn't know there was a sixth Ranger, right? Like they were dealing with the first 15 episodes. They did what they needed to do. And then he's like, oh, like there's this Green Ranger. And he watched ahead. He's like, this guy's around for a while. And so they had to scramble and cast Tommy and come up with this whole thing. But it's just, again, it's so funny. As kids, we have no idea of what's going on with all of that. And then to kind of get that insight, it made me laugh. The special features were terrific. I can't recommend them enough.
That's awesome.
Now, the one other big piece that I wanted to ask you about before we dive in specifically to White Light is uh, Jason David Frank, over the past couple of years, had his Power Ranger protection program. He was going around to comic book stores, and uh, comic book stores are near and dear to my heart. I worked at one for many years. I've made a couple of documentaries about them, including My Comic Shop Country. And so I love to see that. I thought, and so that, the idea of comic shops and Tommy, it's like, oh my god, like this is this is as a fan of both, it was amazing. And he came to your shop. Can you tell me about like how that came about and just what the experience was like? That must have been a very special moment.
Yeah, well, yes, that was incredibly humbling, is the word that I'm going to put out first of all. So the way that this went down was very odd. My manager was just coming back in from out of break, and our part timer gets a phone call on the store line and goes, "Hey, manager." Our manager is also John, which is really weird, but he has an H, so he spells it wrong. Um, so we have a call about, maybe a guest coming to the store, and my manager looks at me and says, "You take it. You're good at this stuff." And I said, "Okay, I have no idea what I'm getting into." And I get on the phone and I introduce myself, and it's a member of JDF's team. Nicole, who is an amazing human being, and proceeded to just introduce herself, extremely professional, very, to the point of, "I'm representing Jason David Frank. He played the Green Power Ranger." And I was like, um, "This is awesome. Continue." And she told me about the Ranger Protection Program and how he's coming to stores. And I said, I just got to stop you and get some clarification. Are you talking about the Sioux Falls location or our Lincoln, Nebraska store? Because we have two stores. And this is going to break my heart or make me really happy. Please continue. And she clarified it was for the Sioux Falls store. And I said, "Yes, this is awesome." So I remember being very animated with her on the phone, and kind of, we were just matching each other's energy. And she sent me details right away about the program to our store email. How to, we bounced back and forth on a couple of questions, just trying to get the ball rolling. And I've got to say, I made it a point to be host to the most, down to the fact of asking her for favorite snacks and drinks for both of them, because I am a huge people pleaser and I want to make sure our guests feel like royalty. And so that she got a kick out of that too. So fast forward, that was a couple of months before the event. We got the verbiage about the program and what we could share, because there was some criteria with the program itself. And so, yeah, we started getting the word out, and the buzz and the interest and the excitement, not just in Sioux Falls where we're based, but in the region around, because in the Midwest, it's not city, city, city. It's city, lots of farmland, city, like it's like almost like colonies kind of thing. But a lot of interest from Minnesota, from Iowa, from those that couldn't make it to the shop in Nebraska because he had stopped at a shop there. We had some folks from Nebraska. So our store got a lot of phone calls, a lot of emails, a lot of Facebook with questions on the program, on the event. With these events, they brought us up to speed on using their queue system program, which ended up being very slick. And I absolutely love that, and it helped keep things orderly. Fast forwarding to the day of, just meeting JDF right away, was just, I just shook his hand, and I don't know about you, but like, I did my best to like just be in event coordinator mode, kind of thing, and make sure I stay, on the objective, and that it's a fun event, but it's also a safe event for our guests and, for everybody. And so I didn't like fanboy out too much right away because I was just kind of in work mode. But it was really cool just to get to shake his hand, and, he seemed truly excited to be there. We talked really quick in the back room and walked him out onto the floor, and the guests were ready to go, raring to go. And it was just the craziest thing, just seeing the level of excitement. And here I am just walking in front of him as if I can offer any sort of protection to this guy. He's a warrior. He saved the world a million times, and got him to his area. And I will say that I then started fanboying out after that, watching him interact with the guests, seeing the impressions that he made with people, young and old alike. It was very special to get to watch and witness. During that time, he was kind of, lifting up to me, you know, like, John, this green and white popcorn that you got is awesome, or these green M&M cookies that we made, you know, because we also own a cookie shop here in Sioux Falls, the same owners of the comic shop do. So it was a lot of fun just having him kind of have fun with the event and enjoy himself as our guest, and that's what I look for. You know, when we bring someone to Rainbow Comics is, and not bad for our first go of it. This is my first guest, anyways, that I've hosted, yeah, it was pretty surreal.
I can imagine. I mean, the closest experience that I have to that, and I mentioned this before, but we had a local convention here in White Plains, New York, and I got to moderate a panel with Johnny Young Bosch and Catherine Sutherland, and same type of thing. It's like I tried to stay in the mode of okay, I'm the panel moderator. I'm here helping out my buddy who's running the convention, and we want to have a smooth panel, and bring up questions and elicit answers that the audience will be interested in, and trying to sharing my fandom, but also not overdoing it and not fanboying out. And I think I struck a good balance. But yeah, it is so surreal when you're face to face, and hearing you talk about it, it's just the alchemy that had to kind of go into this, because if they had gotten someone else on the phone, right, who maybe was a few years older or a few years younger, and they were like, I'm here with Jason David Frank, the Green Ranger, the response could have been, okay, right? But they got you, like they got just the right person. And I'm so glad that you were able to have that experience and that you were able to deliver that for the Rainbow community. And that's great. I mean, I think, you hear a lot of it, you see a lot of it. I mean, a lot of people who he did cameos for, we all know what cameo is now. It's just funny. It's like not in a show, but cameos for people, these personalized videos. A lot of them have posted them on YouTube, and you see the time that he spends, and that means something. That creates that impression, and especially to have spent, we're talking 30 years since the show came out, right? That it's been with us, and whether or not we're rewatching episodes all the time, or it's just something that we kind of look back on, it's been with us for all this time. So like have that moment and have it be a positive experience. That's such a special thing. So I'm really glad you got to have that. That's incredible.
The other thing that I did get a kick out of too is that they did a ticket kind of stub thing where we would just number them. So like person 1, person 2 for the queue. But what we like to do is when we book movie theaters out for movies and invite all of our box holders to come out with us to a Marvel movie, we'll make a custom ticket stub. So on the back, we'll print out artwork and then have the rainbow logo sticker in the middle. So we did Green Ranger ones of that. So it was double-sided, and we just laminate with packing tape, and just something kind of fun. And he started signing those for guests. And then at the end, he was talking with the staff, and he just goes, Johnny, the amount of detail and care that you put into these things is crazy, And I just was like, well, I mean, that's just something we do for our movie people, and I'm glad you like it. That's awesome. He was like, nobody makes that effort on tickets like you do. So it was that meant a lot to me, getting feedback on all the details and stuff, and that it meant something to him, and because I mean, he sees a lot of people, and that was a nice touch. I also appreciated he stayed with the staff and talked to us for about 30-40 minutes about life, and then I walked them out to their car and got to talk to them a little bit more. And yeah, one of the last things before they left was he said, if I ever come back to South Dakota, I'm not even going to approach the other shops, strictly Rainbow. And I was like, that's awesome, man. I appreciate that. So it's really nice feedback and just a good human, because you usually with shows like conventions, it's a tight schedule and then we're done, and that's how it goes. But from what I hear from other shops and from people that have met him at the convention, is he always made time, for people. And so that's something that I noticed firsthand, and I appreciate. So.
Well, thank you for sharing that. And now let's celebrate his return as the White Ranger.
Yes.
All right. So White Light aired on October 17th and 18th, 1994, two-part storyline during season 2 of Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. Now, previously we discussed the run of episodes where Tommy ultimately lost his powers seemingly for good, and I was going to say seemingly left the show, yet he remained in the opening credits. This leads me to, I think, maybe the biggest question that I have for you here, especially going back to our memories as kids watching this, is how confident were you that it was going to be Tommy under that White Ranger helmet? Because I have a very specific experience and memory tied to this. And I'm always curious to hear from other people. So again, we find out in this episode, in this 2-part episode, that Zordon and Alpha, they've had this secret mission, this hidden chamber within the command center, creating a new Power Ranger, the White Ranger. And our Rangers, they've been kept in the dark. They don't know what's going on. Billy stumbles upon this chamber. He sees them working on a Ranger. He doesn't know what's going on. They're all confused. And then Zordon and Alpha present the White Ranger. And he descends from the ceiling of the command center and lands and removes the helmet. Kimberly faints and we cut to commercial and we come back and we find out that, of course, who else could it possibly be, in retrospect, who else could it have been but Tommy Oliver? But my question, and he becomes the leader of the Rangers, and I want to talk about that. We'll circle back to that in a second. And this just really cements this character as the center, I would say, of this franchise, certainly for the years ahead. But I think generally speaking, when you look at the arc of the franchise, it always seems to kind of come back to Tommy in some way, shape, or form. So that's my question. I mean, how confident were you that it was going to be Tommy? Did you have other theories? Were you surprised? What was your reaction?
So I remember this very vividly. As a kid, I literally fell for the line of, I think it was either Kimberly or Chidi just talking about who does this new person think he is, or why are Alpha and Zordon like replacing him with someone else? And I was like, who could it be? Like, what is going on with this show? I mean, Tommy's going to be back at some point. I was so upset. And then when Billy peeks into the chamber and we see the arm and maybe some of the shoulder blade on the table, I'm like, it's not another person, it's a robot, was my theory as a kid. I remember thinking that. And so totally off the mark. Now, of course, I know. But I will say that I remember just being so on the edge of my chair when he was descending from the white light of the command center. And I was just like, this is crazy. And even now, when I rewatched it the other day, when I sent you the photos, I was just like, I remember being so enchanted with that. And the simplest of effects. I mean, this is not, computer CGI much or anything. It's wires and a light, But the fact that you can grab my attention as a young viewer and have me focus on something for 2 minutes, it means you did a really good job with that writing of having powerful characters. And kudos to the whole creative team on that one. That reveal, that was pretty cool.
I'll say they got me too. Not exactly for the same reason, but I feel like there were multiple misdirects that maybe as an adult, you're like, okay, you can kind of see past them. But as a kid, they totally worked. And, circling back to your earlier point, I've been thinking about this a lot in rewatching these episodes. We didn't have the internet. It's like, I don't know the age of our audience here, but for anyone who's younger listening or watching, it's like, yeah, it was very different. I mean, we'll get into this in an upcoming episode where we talk about the introduction of Rocky, Adam, and Aisha and the power transfer and that whole bit of business. But, it wasn't until I was older and on the internet that I learned that Austin St. John, Twee Trang, and Walter Jones had left the show. And that was why there were all these faraway shots and recycled footage and, helmet versions of those characters for so many episodes. As a kid, I think it registered on some level, but I definitely was not able to piece together like, oh, those actors aren't there because they've quit the show over salary disputes. So, it was so different. So yeah, it would be totally a completely different scenario now if we were going through this, as far as who the identity of the White Ranger was. But anyway, what got me, there were a couple of things that got me. I think the biggest by far was the relatively recent introduction of Curtis, Zach's cousin, and Richie, who was a bit of a love interest for the Trini character. And after Zach and Trini left, those characters just got dropped completely. But at the time, they were in the mix, and I was convinced that Richie was going to be the White Ranger. So much so, and I believe I said this in another episode, so much so I made a bet. This was first grade? Second grade. I want to say second grade. And I made a bet with two of the other kids in the class for like a quarter. But I was, I was so sure that it was going to be Richie. And of course I was wrong and I lost my quarter. But watching it now, I do admire the way that they had all of this play out, because there are a couple of other things that are like a little bit more subtle that I think are actually kind of clever. One is Zed, Lord Zed, has his own plot in these episodes. He creates the monster Nimrod, but really he wants to get Tommy. And there's a point in part one. We only see Tommy for that one scene in part one of White Light where he gets out of the lake and then he's teleported away. And of course, later you realize that Zordon and Alpha were teleporting him. But it was right after Zed was talking about getting him and, presumably, turning him evil again or whatnot, because we can't have anyone die. But, so the timing of that really makes you think like, oh, he's been abducted by Zed. And then also, you mentioned before when Billy is debriefing the Rangers about, hey, I saw Zordon and Alpha. There was this guy on a table. They're making a new Ranger. And, Kimberly in particular is saying, hey, like, why couldn't this have been Tommy? It has this effect of, especially for a kid, of making you think like, oh, it's not Tommy. Like they're talking about why it's not Tommy. So it further makes you discount him as a candidate for this. So I have to tip my hat to them. I think, especially for a young audience, I think they did a good job of making it a surprise. But of course, again, certainly having seen the episodes, but even just watching it in 2023 with adult eyes, it's like, yeah, of course you look at it and they kept him in the opening credits. It's like, of course it was going to be him.
Now, to your point, though, that teleporting scene is also what threw me off with the sequence of Zed, being right around there. And then the pain that Tommy was getting when being teleported. It's not a normal Ranger teleport. So I was like, oh, he's being nabbed by the bad guys, So I could see that. Yeah.
Now, I learned something today. Hashtag today I learned. Are you familiar with another 90s Saban show, VR Troopers?
Yes. Oh, gosh, yes.
Do you know where I'm going with this?
No.
Okay. I did not know this until today. So to our credit, John, listen, I don't think we were so off to be surprised because, as I learned, originally, Jason David Frank was going to be the lead in VR Troopers and even filmed the pilot presentation. It's like a 6-minute thing. It's on YouTube. If you look up... It wasn't called VR Troopers yet. It was called Cybertron. So if you look up Cybertron pilot presentation, Jason David Frank, you will find it. So it's Jason David Frank as the lead of what would become VR Troopers. Brad Hawkins, who would go on to star in VR Troopers, was originally cast as the White Ranger. But Tommy proved so popular that Saban had them trade shows. So, again, in our defense... maybe it wasn't such a foregone conclusion that it was going to be Tommy. My mind was blown, though. I had no idea that this was even a thing. So thanks to Rangers Wiki for that little tidbit in their trivia section, because complete news to me. Had no idea. But can you imagine what the franchise would have been like otherwise? It's nuts.
Oh, yeah. Like, just, first of all, JDF on VR Troopers, that's a whole nother thing. Like, I would totally watch it. I watched all of it anyways. It was a fun show.
Me too.
But Power Rangers, I mean, come on. Like I want him where he's at because that's what we know and that's what we love. So
yeah, man. So it's crazy. The other thing I'll say in our defense. Now, this came later, so it doesn't really quite work as a defense. However, with what I mentioned before with Rocky, Adam, and Aisha and the power transfer, you get 3 new characters who end up taking over for the Rangers. So the idea that new characters would be introduced and then become a Ranger is not so crazy. And it happened very shortly thereafter. So, I guess in my defense, the fact that we had Curtis and we had Richie, it's like, it's not so crazy maybe that one of them could have ended up being the Ranger. So now I don't know with the Brad Hawkins bit, like, I don't know if they would have introduced his character earlier, right? Or if it just would have been like the first time you see him is when he takes off the helmet. I have no idea. But fascinating to think what might have been. Clearly, they made the right call. I mean, Tommy was, his popularity was unmatched, and it was, like I said, I think especially coming off of all those Green Ranger episodes, like this just felt like such a moment of triumph to have him return as the White Ranger. Amazing.
Hands down, agreed. And just such a cool, successful moment of the arc. I mean, the arc's not done yet as we have these other episodes to review on our show, let alone some other shows that you're probably going to do. He's such a rich character, man. And I will say that I never saw, circling back to the event really quick and to some of these other offerings out there, such as the Green Power Ranger versus Ryu video, or White Ranger versus Scorpion. Shout out to all these fan things where JDF's like embracing it and making it, feel like it's organic and everything. I'm so just blown away about the level of passion surrounding the fandom in a good way. It's so cool to see it, and the comic books continue that torch for me. So yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Now, I mentioned a couple of times about Jason, Zach, and Trini leaving, and this business about Zordon announcing Tommy as the new leader
Yes.
of the Power Rangers, which was not the original intention, as I've learned, but was added after the fact and is clear as you're watching it. You just hear Zordon say it while we're focused on the kids. And came about after, again, the Austin St. John, Twee Trang, and Walter Jones left the show. So, retroactively, I guess they went back in and they made it that Zordon, installs Tommy as the new leader of the Power Rangers. And, so that in and of itself is interesting. But I watched a couple episodes after White Light. And what was surprising to me, like I just didn't remember this, there are only 2 more episodes after the White Light 2-parter where Zach, Jason, and Trini are actually there. Mm. After those 2 episodes following White Light, we're into this realm of, only seeing them via recycled footage, other actors dubbing them over. They're always morphed. They're whatever the case may be. And then of course, Rocky, Adam, and Aisha are introduced, and we get the power transfer. So it's such and I had forgotten this. It's such a fleeting moment in Mighty Morphin Power Rangers history where you have the OG cast with Tommy as the White Ranger. I had just, I just hadn't kept track of how short that really was. It's unfortunate.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's when they announced that, the HR in me kind of sat back and I was like, well, that's going to lead to a lot of complications. And I remember growing up, I actually liked the original 5. And then the Green Ranger was that cherry on top, And so for me, I was used to, Jason being at the helm and stuff, and Tyrannosaurus kind of running the show. And then when that happened, I remember being like, whoa, what a shakeup, and I'm along for the ride. I'm a young viewer. Now when I watch it, I'm just like, ooh, it makes me think of instant demotion, and I feel kind of bad for Jason in some regards. But it is what it is. And, I can't say I disagree. Tommy is a cool character, and he was a terrific leader of the team. When you watch the portrayal of him, supporting his teammates and just how he leads himself, at school, outside of school, and as a ranger. So.
That's the thing. I can appreciate the situation that the writers were in, and I think they did the best they could. Again, as an adult watching it, you wish that Jason's demotion could have been addressed at all, right? But it just wasn't, that wasn't built for that. Because the way when you watch it, and again, even knowing that Zordon's line was just thrown in after the fact about Tommy being the new leader, they cut to Jason, and Jason's like, "This is great," and it's like clearly that's not what he was originally responding to. and what would Jason actually feel about that? In another world, like it would be amazing to see that kind of storyline play out. Although it's funny too, because I actually would be curious to know the rationale. I guess the answer is that I'll answer my own question, that we had a good few episodes before Rocky, Adam, and Aisha were there. And so if you're going to have Tommy running the show, right, then you kind of have to establish him as the leader. Because I was going to say, why not just wait until Rocky, Adam, and Aisha come in, and then you can say, Tommy, now you're stepping up as the senior member. You're the leader of the team. But to do that before, but I guess you kind of have to, because you're not going to be able to see Jason for half a dozen episodes. So it only makes sense. I get it.
But yeah, ultimately, great reveal. Great. And what blows my mind about all these episodes, that we're talking about tonight, and all of them, how much can happen in 20 minutes. It's crazy. Shout out to the creative team, man, for real. That's a lot of information to pack into that small of a segment. So, and they did it well.
And listen,
So,
you know, and we're focusing on the most relevant part of White Light, but also to the writer's credit, in this two-parter, we also have this subplot, the B story of Bulk and Skull
mm,
finding the miniaturized Rita's dumpster, which crash landed in the park at Angel Grove, and they spend 2 episodes trying to pry it open, and eventually knock themselves out. And then, you know, she's able to escape, but the Rangers intervene and they blast her back into space, and then she'll return in the wedding arc, which we're going to get to in an upcoming episode.
mm,
But there's also that going on. And I've gone on record, I'm not the biggest Bulk and Skull fan,
mm,
especially as an adult, but I think this was, for me at least, I think this was sort of their shining moment, because at least they had a subplot that was relevant.
mm.
And so it's like, on top of a new Ranger and the revelation that it's Tommy, you also have our original antagonist coming back on the scene. And, you know, she's not going to make her full return yet, but, you know, this is letting you know, like, hey, you know, she was sent away at the beginning of season 2, but it's like, hey, she's still in the mix.
Mm.
I love that whole that whole runner with them trying to get her out of the dumpster.
I just love seeing her. I think she's a wonderful character, and I understand there's like, you know, iterations of her, you know, down the road too. Now, open book. I have not seen too terribly much past a little bit of Turbo, minus maybe some of the key moments. So that, again, my journey kind of cut off abruptly when, you know, we moved over there, and then but from what I have seen on and off, I did watch the, you know, the episode with all the Red Rangers in it on, because it came up on YouTube, and I was like, I just got to see this. And there was a lot to unpack there, so I'm like, okay, I probably should go back and watch all this at some point. So that's on my list to crush it. But my point with that was that I understand that there's a lot of lore and history with the villain hierarchy. And I totally want to learn about all that. So, of course, I want to watch all this to see how the characters interact and stuff. And yeah.
Totally. Our journeys are not entirely dissimilar. You actually made it past where I did. I stopped watching actually towards the end of Zio. So we'll do an episode later on in the podcast where we'll get into the Turbo era and Tommy's final episode. So we'll get there, but that will be new for me. So, you know, that I mean, Mighty Morphin was really the height of my fandom into Zio, and then I sort of dropped off. But yeah, it was cool to see Rita and to see Bulk and Skull in that capacity. I really enjoyed their storyline. There was just, I feel like this 2-parter was really firing on all cylinders, because you had Bulk and Skull trying to open this dumpster, not knowing what's inside, but of course we do. This mystery of who the White Ranger is going to be. And you know, that's the other interesting angle with all of this, is that Zordon and Alpha do this in secret, which, you know, it's one thing to keep the audience in the dark, but, you know, our characters are in the dark. And this is another instance where I wish this could have been mined a little bit more, but I understand we're dealing with the kid show. But you know, you would think that there might be some frustration on the part of the Rangers. I mean, you get some of that in that scene in Billy's lab, but it's kind of messed up. Like, Zordon and Alpha, they don't even tell the Rangers, hey, we're going to be off the board for a little while. They're just like, oh, it's kind of quiet. Like, let's go work on our mission. They don't tell the Rangers. And then when Zed creates this Nimrod monster, you know, the Rangers go to the command center and it's dark. You know, and they go into battle and they're on the ropes, and, you know, Billy teleports out and he goes to the command center. And that's when he has this moment where he falls through. Such a great visual. And they kept that in the opening credits for a long time. I love that visual of him, you know, kind of descending in the white light and finding that hidden chamber. But yeah, like, it's messed up. And then the the cherry on top of that is, after they reveal the White Ranger, Zordon is so pleased with himself. He's so pleased with himself. It's like, all right, buddy.
Yeah. Way happier than normal. Like, I just was like, whoa. Yeah.
Yeah. How about you keep your Rangers, you know, in the loop here? I did appreciate, though, that they, you know, it shows how hard it is to make a Ranger, which I thought was kind of cool, because it, you know, otherwise it might beg the question, it's like, hey, well, just make more Rangers all the time. So I feel like this showed it, like, hey, we were able to do this, but it really took a lot.
Yeah.
So you know, I don't know if I would go so far as to say that White Light is my all-time, you know, is my all-time favorite episode of the show. It's definitely up there, but I do think, like I said, it's sort of the last hurrah for the original iteration of the team. It's this triumph for Tommy and a great postscript to all of the Green Ranger episodes. And just the way these are structured with the Zordon and Alpha intrigue, the Rangers losing at the end of part 1, which they don't do a lot, and they don't lose often. Every now and then, the Bulk and Skull story, I feel like this, in a lot of ways, represents the peak of that original Mighty Morphin era. These 2 episodes.
And one other thing I did want to be sure to lift up regarding part 2 was when we first meet Saba and the Tiger Zord. I gotta give it up to the scene where the Tiger Zord like jumps and falls on its back, and Tommy's like, "I thought you knew what you were doing," and just having fun with it, and that to me really reminded me a lot of the fun notes of Jason David Frank, just in general, just kind of that goofy, playfulness, because he always had kind of those mannerisms from watching videos of him at conventions and then getting to meet him in person and stuff. It was just really cool to get to see that, that's just kind of held true over the years.
Now, so speaking of Saba and the Tiger Zord and Tommy Morphed, you're probably aware, especially maybe you saw these episodes when you were in Japan, but in the Super Sentai series, A, the White Ranger came from a different series than our Mighty Morphin Rangers, and B, was a child. Right?
That I believe so was right. I'd have to Google it. I haven't dug into the Japanese series recently. But that wouldn't surprise me at all. One thing I noticed even before moving to Japan was the overall difference in the outfit, just visually. Because even the Green Ranger fit the motif, of what we were going for here. But White Ranger felt like just something entirely different. So that's fair. Yeah.
One question for you. I feel like initially what made Tommy so cool was that he was this 6th Ranger. There was this mystery. There was this danger. He starts off as an antagonist. Yes, he's under a spell, but still he's an enemy turned ally. And then, very early on into his tenure with the Rangers, he's losing his powers. He comes back. All that back and forth, right? But he occupied a very specific space as this 6th Ranger. And then from White Light forward, he's really positioned at the center. He's now the leader. Is there a preferred version of Tommy for you? Like, do you like him more as the straight-laced leader, or do you like him more, not a bad boy, but do you like him more as this sort of darker, more mysterious 6th Ranger?
Well, I gotta say I liked the edgy better, but I also am pleased that a kids show took the time to develop this character so richly, I guess, for lack of a better word, but just making him so in depth that we meet both sides. Especially in these episodes we're going to be reviewing coming up, literally meeting both sides. And it's kind of cool. And it's also a testament to his acting, and just seeing how he portrayed both. So.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I think it's,
I like edgy though.
No, I think what ultimately makes his arc so rich is that he's occupied both roles. But yeah, there's something to be said for that 6th Ranger. It's why, I love Jason as the leader, but I love Jason as the Gold Ranger too. There's really something to be said for that. Of course, I want to segue into the second arc that we're going to talk about. The last thing I want to say about White Light, and then of course we can always circle back if there's anything else you want to talk about. But Rita makes a comment at one point about how Bulk and Skull essentially remind her of Squat and Babu. And again, this was, online research. I guess there was a fan theory that, for lack of a better description, that Bulk and Skull were sort of the human incarnation of Squat and Babu. Like, did you ever come across anything like this? Because it was new to me, but it's an interesting idea because they, in stature and the roles that they occupy, there's definitely a lot of parallels there.
Yeah, I didn't ever put 2 and 2 together with that, but that's completely legit. I love that.
White Light, I mean, truly a high point, I think, for the series, and amazing to see Tommy back and in that role. And the show was going to change in a big way just a few episodes later with half the team being replaced. But for this moment, it was iconic, and that reveal, that's one of those things, sort of scenes, moments that are seared into my brain. again, Tommy descending, taking off the helmet, that's right up there. And I imagine most people listening or watching our episode would agree. So we also rewatched Return of the Green Ranger, which came later in the season. This was a 3-part storyline where Zed and Rita, who are now married, this comes after the wedding 3-parter where Rita returns, they call upon the Wizard of Deception, who sends our 5 core rangers back in the past to Colonial Angel Grove, which apparently was a thing. And they're unable to morph, and they're being hunted by the townspeople. And the Wizard of Deception turns these rats into giant monsters, and that's sort of their side of the story. And in the present, the wizard is able to, it takes an entire episode, but is able to obtain a lock of Tommy's hair. For all the hair this guy has, it's shocking to me that it took 30 minutes for the wizard to get a lock of his hair, which he uses to create a clone, a duplicate of Tommy, who he turns evil and transforms into the Green Ranger. So this is Green Ranger versus White Ranger, filmed in Australia during the production of the movie, which is highly evident as you're watching all of the Colonial Angel Grove scenes where from the townspeople to the quote unquote British soldiers all have Australian accents. Not much of an effort went into hiding those. Before I give my take on this, but maybe it's clear from the way I described it, what was your, well, first of all, do you remember watching these episodes?
Yeah.
And then,
Yeah.
What's your impression of them now in particular?
Okay, so yeah, rewatching it, I did like the going back in time thing was just more of a filler piece for me, but it was the show. This is a product of its time, and there's a lot of shows that would do these kinds of episodes. So the fact that they were able to lace an amusing kind of piece with something much more detrimental of Tommy versus Tommy, I think was very wise. Because if this was by itself, I probably would have been like, like probably not my favorite episode of Power Rangers, but it certainly is a product of its time with that. There were some interesting notes to it, though, such as the inability of morphine is an interesting one. And we've seen it maybe a couple of other episodes, too. But seeing the characters truly feel without is an interesting concept. Having them hide from soldiers where they probably could take them out, with their moves and stuff. But, there's 4 soldiers right now. Who's to say there's not 48 around the bend? Who knows? Would the townsfolk accept them? Probably not, because they're different. So there's a moment there of, we're actually in trouble. And that to me caught my attention a little bit. I will also say that Ben, who is Bulk, but in medieval times, was running at the rats with his fist up, guarding, the gal when the Rangers were in front, and the Rangers were like, no, you guys go away. And that was kind of cool too, I've never seen Bulk, approach conflict before. So it was kind of fun in that regard. So it really was a fun kind of puff piece for me overall. But when you mix it up with the seriousness and the heavy nature of the Tommies, I think that for a kid show, it was probably the right call.
Yeah, that's probably true. On the note of Bulk and Skull, I meant to say this earlier, so I'm glad you mentioned Bulk again. So again, going back to those special features on the DVD, I did not sit through the entire The Good, the Bad, and the Stupid because, again, for me, a little bit of Bulk and Skull really goes a long way. But I fast forwarded through it, and at the end, they included something that I had completely forgotten about for 30 years, and then it all came right back to me. Do you remember the PSA that the actors who play Bulk and Skull film that aired as a commercial during Power Rangers where they appeared as themselves and explained how they are actors? They're not really bullies, but they're just playing roles on TV. It's amazing. It's Paul and Jason, and Paul is playing with his niece, and kids come up and they're like, hey, you're Bulk. And he's like, no, my name is Paul. And then Jason Narvi shows up and spills ice cream on Paul's shoe. And the kids are like, oh, Bulk, get him, pound him. And he's like, hey, no, like that's just a character I play. In
Hmm.
real life, Jason's my best friend.
Hmm.
And I remember that. I remember watching that as a kid. So it was so funny. It's something I hadn't thought about in so long. But like yourself, yeah, the bulk and skull in the past, that was, you know, amusing enough. The things that stood out to me the most from the Colonial Angel Grove, other than the accent, I suppose, one was how I don't mean to beat up on poor Adam. Because you know, now we're later in season 2. This is when Rocky, Adam, and Aisha are there. Adam falls for this girl in the town, like so fast to the point that when it's time for those Rangers to return to the present, he wants her to come. He wants her to come with them.
Yeah.
It's like, buddy,
Yeah.
you gotta slow down here.
Yeah. That's young love right there.
That's
Wow.
young love right there. That's you know, the innocence of Adam Park, I guess. But it just made me laugh. It's like we've seen so little of any meaningful interaction between these characters.
But I've known you my whole life. Yes.
Yeah. And then of course in the present he meets her descendant, and that's the note we end on. So it's a nice little button to the 3-parter. But that really made me laugh. But then, okay, so I came across, so you know, we're in 2023 now. A few years ago, I guess when I realized that all of Power Rangers was on Netflix. Now, as of this recording, only a few seasons are there, but many, if not most, or all of the seasons are on the Power Rangers YouTube channel, and there are DVDs and all that. Anyway, a few years ago, I fell down this rabbit hole on Netflix, and I was watching old episodes, and I came across this Return of the Green Ranger 3-parter, which I had completely forgotten. So it was wild. So this, you know, it wasn't like I was coming back to this with totally fresh eyes. Like I had watched this fairly recently. But the wildest part about this episode to me is that, and I know I'm skipping ahead, but ultimately, Tommy is able to defeat the Wizard of Deception and break the evil spell that is over his clone, right? So clone Tommy becomes good.
Mm.
And they go back to Colonial Angel Grove to take care of those giant rats. And Clone Tommy decides that his place is there. He can't go back to the present. We can't have 2 Tommies. So he's going to stay in Colonial Angel Grove. And all I could think about is just the time travel implications of this. Is Clone Tommy's ancestor? It's mind-boggling. And I cannot believe that Zordon would allow this.
Mm. Yep. There's, you know, between that and then the moment with, you know, Adam, like, babe, come back with me. What? Like, you know, like there's the butterfly effect is, you know. So I was kind of cracking up about that too. Yeah, seeing him stay put was crazy to me. And I don't really remember that part. So when I rewatched this, I was so glad you had me do it because I'm like, what? And then when he summons his own hat, I was just like, that's amazing. Okay. This is fine. Green Ranger can do no wrong. That's fine. That's fine. But yeah.
Well,
I wish.
Yeah. No, go ahead.
Yeah. No, I was gonna say I wish him all the best during these colonial adventures for sure. But I don't know, man. I agree with you. I think that yeah, there probably was maybe a better course of action. I don't know what it would have been, but yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. And I know I'm overthinking it, but at the same time, it's just kind of, it's nuts. Now, you mentioned materializing the hat. I mean, that seemed to be something that he was able to do through his morphing abilities. Do you agree? Because right, that wasn't something that Tommy did with the wizard stick.
That was just something that he did, and it had like green flare around it, and it made me actually think of the Green Ranger versus Ryu, you know, throwdown, superpower beatdown, where he did the green energy ball, because he did do that at the team when he first debuted. He did do some sort of a green energy burst at them, and so it was kind of cool to see Superhero Beatdown call that out, and then to see this kind of magic hat appearing years later. I'm like, maybe there's something to that, and so. Yeah, that's yeah.
Yeah. Now look, not to nitpick, but if our Rangers couldn't morph in the past,
yeah,
how does Clone Tommy have any abilities in the past?
I couldn't even tell you.
You know, it's a
Yeah.
you know, and I don't mean to dump on this 3-parter, but I feel like the concept, the idea of there's a clone, and look, not to take us on another tangent, but the Spider-Man clone saga was my entry point into Spider-Man comics. So as much as I know it's reviled by a lot of fans, it holds a special place for me. So, well, man, anytime we're talking clones, like I'm there, I'm on board. But the idea of a Tommy clone who's evil, and we're gonna have a Green Ranger versus White Ranger battle. We're gonna have Dragon Zord versus Tiger Zord. It all sounds so cool on paper.
Yeah.
I do not feel like it really resonates in a meaningful way as it unfolds. It all feels kind of meaningless. I don't know. It didn't have the impact that I would expect in a storyline like this based on the description of it.
Yeah.
Like, how did you feel?
I think that watching it this time around, I will say one of my gripes with it was that, okay, the Dragon Zord is now evil because I have given him pupils on his eyes. What? Like the black dots that appear in the middle of the red Dragon Zord eyes. And I know it's the smallest of details, you guys, and I'm complaining. This is the Dragon Zord. Okay, there's no pupils in those eyes. They don't need to be. He looks beautiful as he is. Leave him alone. And I just was I find myself, even when I watch it this time around, I just remember being so mad about that. Like, it doesn't make sense. So that made me a little grouchy. And I will say that he had to play that flute multiple times. The Dragon Zord's like, bro, I'm sleeping. I don't want to. No, what are we doing? What are we doing? Who are you? You're not the real Tommy. Because there was a point where a spell had to be basically cast on the Dragon Zord or whatever, right? To make him more susceptible to it. So that was just really weird and not really fleshed out now that I think about it. The battle with the Tiger Zord, same idea. There was a certain element of, the Dragon Zord's not kidding around here. I didn't like seeing the Dragon Zord go down at the end like that. Like, no, wait, we'll just shut him off and he'll tip over like a house appliance. And then that's that, I don't know. I would agree with you. I think my gripes are more the cosmetics of the battle than anything. But it had potential to be so much more. It's what I'm trying to say.
It did, and this might be a product of they filmed this while they were doing the movie, and so it's a lot of this is Green Ranger and White Ranger both morphed in battle. Yeah. So we have Jason David Frank's voice dubbing over everything, but you're not getting that, maybe that the personal connection that you typically do. That might have something to do with it. And like the other Rangers are off the board. I feel like what would have made this story more interesting is them interacting with evil Tommy or something like that. Like, I think ultimately, and I don't mean to nitpick on this, but it just doesn't, I don't know what this really said. I don't think this really had anything to say about Tommy as a character. Yet, I feel like there could have been some opportunity, right? If you're showing where Tommy is now versus essentially a version of him, from the beginning, maybe there was some opportunity to say or show something about the character. And I don't feel like they were necessarily concerned with delving into that. It was more just like, hey, we'll show the White Ranger or Green Ranger fighting. And yeah, as a kid, I mean, it's cool enough to see. Watching it now, especially over 3 parts. I think if this had been a one and done, or even a 2-parter, this could have been really tight and really cool. But I think spread out over 3 episodes, it just really got tedious after a while.
Yeah. Gosh, I was gonna say too. Again, props to JDF. The voices between the two were definitely distinguished.
Yeah.
So I love the inflections, taking us back to old Tommy versus new. And I gotta say, watching them both morph back to back. Was kind of cool too, so I appreciated that. And you of course do see the better definition morph with the White Ranger and the lighting and everything. It's just so different, from the old one. So yeah, I got a kick out of that too.
In terms of recycled footage, so it is hilarious to me. I mean, I could think of at least 3 instances, and maybe there are more. Audience, let me know. But in the Green with Evil arc, when Tommy calls forth the Dragon Zord for its initial path of destruction, in the Mutiny, when Zed and Parantis Head are able to take control of the Tyrannosaurus Rex and Dragon Zord, and here when we have evil clone Tommy calling forth the Dragon Zord. The Dragon Zord's path of destruction is always the same, down to that same red and white pipe it's always munching on.
Yes. Like, they just replaced that. Bummer. Another one's gone, I guess. That poor plant just can't catch a break.
It's so, that's, we talk about things, between the scenes that you would have wanted to see. It's like, I want to see the meeting right at that plant where they're like, God damn it, again.
That would have been gold. Like, not again. Yeah.
If they were like, stop painting it red and white, like it stands out too much.
Yeah.
I don't know. That made me laugh.
I picked up on that too. Yeah.
And then when Clone Tommy infiltrates the command center, all from Green with Evil. You obviously new dialogue, but it's all from Green with Evil, and it's most apparent because they don't show him destroying anything.
Yeah.
In this, yet there's one shot where, again, from Green with Evil, you see Tommy and like all of the dashboard behind him are destroyed. So, look, it is what it is. Again, like they were like, the cast was in Australia, right? Like they were doing, it's like they weren't, very limited in terms of what they were able to do. So, I wish, like I said, on paper, I think Return of the Green Ranger, this idea of two versions of Tommy battling it out, sounds epic. Maybe could have been. Yeah. I don't think we got there, but if you want to see like those two Rangers fight, I think it's cool in that sense.
Yeah, yeah. I think that it's no white light.
It's no white light.
But it's a part of the Ranger history, and just kind of understanding the circumstances surrounding it is helpful. And they all can't be white light or Green with Evil, right? So I take it all with a grain of salt and kind of just see it as, because it's just like comic book series, right? There's issues where we're like, well, that was a speed bump, or whatever. And it's the same thing. Not every episode is going to be a momentous event, but this one had the fixins, like you said, to be the perfect Thanksgiving meal of all Ranger goodness and greatness for Tommy, and it just didn't deliver for us.
Well, when you say they can't all be white light, it's interesting because for this podcast, I'm not rewatching every episode of Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. There's not only are there too many, but I don't know. I don't know that I necessarily have it in me because look, there's a comfort to them. There's a comfort in that familiarity and that formula, but there's also a lot of repetition. And I feel like that could get tedious. And so largely so far, and even in terms of what I've mapped out, we're looking at these event episodes, these big arcs, these moments where we have the changing of the Rangers, changing of the Zords, changing of the powers, like the really pivotal moments in the show. But I don't know, kind of the upshot of that is I feel like it's in my mind, maybe it's creating more of an epic sense of the overall show, because it's true. Like if you watch a standard run of the mill episode, you know what you're going to get and it's entertaining enough, but I don't know how engrossing, how compelling it necessarily is. But you watch something like White Light, you watch something like Green with Evil, and the stakes are so high. There's so much going on. I think like arcs and episodes like that really do represent the best of what this franchise can be.
Mm-hmm. I will say also, just looking at the episodes just as a whole, the fight music in the newer season with the Return of the Green Ranger was actually like better to me. Like when the putties would appear and they would be all doing their stuff or whatever. And shout out to the putties, quirky intros for days. Those guys can vogue like you wouldn't believe. Like I just am like, I kind of remember that, but man, that took me back. I was like, oh man, this is crazy. So Zed's putties definitely are on a different level from Rita's putties.
Yes.
For voguing. Yes.
Man. It's amazing. I recently rewatched The Wedding and you get to see them dance and it's amazing. It's amazing. And in the stage show, which I watched, I didn't watch all of it as I was going through those special features, but I watched some of it and they have this whole dance number. It's amazing.
Also, we didn't really talk about Rita and Zed during this three-parter. The interaction with them. So I had seen those episodes originally. I didn't watch The Wedding. And so when I hopped back into this three-parter, just their chemistry alone and Goldar's discontent with everything was probably one of the things that just had me chuckling during this three-parter. Just the total cacophony of emotions at the Palace on the Moon. It was the best thing ever, and I kind of adore it. I'm kind of here for it. So shout out to Zed and Rita Repulsa.
For sure. We have an episode coming up. In fact, it will most likely be our next episode on the mutiny and the wedding. And so I've rewatched those, and it's amazing. I think like that's one of the things now as an adult watching it. I do appreciate the humor that they were able to sneak in with the villains, especially as we get into this domestic comedy incarnation of the moon base with Red and with Zed and with Red. I can't even say the names. Zed and Rita. There we go.
Yep.
Third time's the charm. With Zed and Rita on the moon, and even, you know what, I jotted this down when I was rewatching White Light with Goldar and Zed when Zordon and Alpha go dark, right? And Zed senses a weakness in the morphing grid. And Goldar is just quick to be like our forces have been getting stronger. And he's like, no, you idiot. Like, so many things like that. Like it's, you know, I guess I found it amusing enough as a kid, but I'm definitely enjoying it more now as I'm rewatching it. There was one last thing that I wanted to say about White Light, and maybe sort of as we circle back and we wind down here, I think this is an important point to make. In White Light, after Tommy is revealed as the White Ranger, Trini and Billy are sent off to repair the Zords damaged in the battle with Nimrod. Jason, Kimberly, and Zach are sent off to Bulk and Skulls to try to prevent them from freeing Rita. And Tommy goes into battle against Nimrod on his own with his new White Tiger Zord and loses. And he has to call on Jason for help. And in the prior episode, the 5 original Rangers also fell in battle against Nimrod. What I appreciated about this was I feel like it would have been very easy for Tommy to just win the day on his own. But I think the way that they played it, and it's not a shock, right? Because this was the whole theme of the show, was the power of working together. But I really appreciated that. Like, you saw the Rangers, the 5 without Tommy fail, and we saw Tommy by himself fail. And it's only when all of them came together that they could beat Nimrod. And as the toy fan, you know, it was cool. We got the new configuration. We got the Tiger Megazord, where the Tiger Zord combined with the Unicorn, Griffin, Lion, and Firebird, and like shot the Firebird out. Like, it was really cool. And then, you know, cool. You have the Red Dragon Zord, you know, march over and they stand side by side at the end, and it's awesome. But I think, again, more just on the theme of the whole show, I really liked that it had to be all of them together. I thought that was a really, really good touch.
Yeah, no, I completely agreed with that. You know, with the 2 arcs, I know we were kind of nagging on, you know, Return of the Green Ranger a little bit there, but tonight, you know, the overall theme of our show tonight, I think, is really just the redemption and kind of full cycle of Tommy as a character. And so this was an exciting pairing for me to get to watch. And just really a cool look at, you know, some of the accomplishments that JDF had, you know, early on in his career.
Absolutely. I can't tell you how much I enjoyed this. Is there anything else that you wanted to say about either of these arcs that we didn't get to?
For those of you that are tuning in, and if you haven't watched them or you haven't watched them recently, definitely recommend checking them out. And I will say, from my outsider experience of not watching everything in between this time around, it's okay, as long as you kind of have a general understanding of who's who with the new faces, you know, that we talked about tonight with the transfer of power. Definitely, you know, it's a very quick viewing, which always surprises me. And we talked about that, how much content can be, you know, crammed into a 20-minute episode. But definitely, you know, highly recommend, sit down, watch it, you know, and enjoy it. It's meant there to be enjoyed. And I left this 5-episode tour of ours just kind of, you know, like, this is awesome. So I'm still excited about it. Yeah.
No, I really appreciate you taking the time to. I know how busy it is at a comic book store, so I appreciate you taking the time to watch and to do this. I too was struck by that. I mean, I have the DVDs, but I rewatched these on Netflix, and you know, you can skip the intro and you can skip to the next episode, and you know, when you cut out the opening credits and the end credits, it's like they're like 18, 19 minutes. I mean, which I'm thinking to myself, like, man, there was a lot of commercials.
Yeah,
like a lot of. I mean, nowadays, there are more commercials. Episodes do tend to be shorter on, you know, we're talking about, you know, broadcast TV, but I feel like for back then, that was a lot.
Yeah. Oh yeah. and just kind of sitting through that, you know. Now, my favorite would be like if there's ever any sort of toy ads or anything. I'm just like, yeah, or you know, things coming up on Fox Kids, like X-Men used to promote heavily for upcoming episodes and stuff. So they weren't all that bad, you know.
But no, this was a blast. I'm really glad you and I were able to connect. This was, you know, this was the first time you and I ever spoke, and
Yes.
I feel like it would probably, I mean, I don't know, the audience, you can tell me. I feel like maybe it sounded like this was not the first time that you and I spoke. So I thank you so much. Really, this was a lot of fun. So Rainbow Comics Cards and Collectibles. Is there any place you would want to direct people to in terms of website, social media?
Yeah.
Where would you want to send people?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, my socials on Twitter and Instagram. You can find me at @Jon on Demand, all one word. I actually do a YouTube-based comic book review show called A Comic Book Look. We have a Facebook group, and then also another Twitter account for that. But if you want to join us on Facebook to continue the comic book conversation, we got you covered. For Rainbow Comics, A Comic Book Look is sponsored through Rainbow Comics, and then I started working there a year ago, so it's kind of crazy. So I do several weekly streams through Rainbow as well, including A Comic Book Look. So you can find us on Facebook, Rainbow Cards and Collectible Comics, Cards, and Collectibles. And we're the Sioux Falls one. You'll also see a Lincoln, Nebraska store. Check them out too. Great team. And yeah, so.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Jon. Thank you, audience. We will be back in 2 weeks. Remember, 2 weeks with our next all-new episode. Remember, once a Ranger fan, always a Ranger fan. This show is part of the Flat Squirrel Podcast Network, home to Digging for Kryptonite, another exciting episode in the adventures of Superman, Summoning the Zords, and My Comic Shop History, available wherever you get your podcasts. Be sure to subscribe and leave a review today. Sign up at patreon.com/Anthony Desiato for additional content. Thank you all.